Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Expense Tracker. In this video, we're going to be teaching you how to create an amazing expense tracker that is fully dynamic. It's going to allow you to automatically take pictures of receipts with your mobile phone and get them automatically uploaded in this expense tracker. It is going to be an epic training. We're going to start from scratch, a blank worksheet, and create every step, every line of code, and every format and formula with you. I can't wait, so let's get started. Alright, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you have not done so yet, please subscribe. I create these videos each and every week for you, unique videos where I show you how to take Excel to the next level, creating real applications for the real world, solving real issues. So I hope you'll join us. Make sure you to click the notification icons bell at the bottom. That's going to help us out, and make sure you get your trainings each and every Tuesday we launch them. So I really appreciate you joining us. In this episode, we're going to create an incredible and dynamic expense tracker. It's going to track all of your expenses, and all you need to do is take a picture with your phone of the receipt. That receipt's going to get automatically loaded into Excel. All you need to do is add a few details, and it's going to save. A full picture of the receipt's going to be displayed. You're going to be able to track all of your expenses by month, by year. It's going to be an epic training and a beautiful application. Hey, if you have not done so yet, please check out our mentorship program. If you love Excel and want to take it to the next level, in fact, especially in this day and age when working from home is so important, you can do just that, and I'll teach you exactly how you can earn amazing income with your Excel skills by creating applications that can be sold night and day all year round. And I'm doing that in my mentorship program, so you hope will join us for that. In this last week of the mentorship program, we created an amazing invoice application where we created a dynamic pop-up menu. It's one you won't want to miss. A menu like you've never seen before, where users can create their own custom invoices. I'm going to show you how to take that talent and bring it into your own application so you can create your own invoices and sell them on the marketplace so you can get yourself reoccurring income. I hope you join us. You can find us at myexcelmentor.com and learn all the details about this amazing program. Tons of students are really happy with the training they're getting and increasing their skills so that they can become independent and financially free. All right, let's get started on this training. I've got a lot to cover, so we're going to try to get it all in the amount of time. So bear with me as I design this. We're going to take those first few columns A and B, and we are going to make them for admin. So we're going to call them gray because I want to make sure that we'll eventually hide those columns. We're going to put some things in there that we want anybody else to see. The first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have a title on this. So we're going to call it Expense Tracker. And that's just going to be the general name, and let's go ahead and give it a nice larger font, perhaps something like our Arial Black, and we'll increase the font something nice. And then I want to extend it over to probably all the way through J. So I'm going to merge and center those cells and give it a format. So I'm going to right click Format and just give it some kind of a fill pattern. Maybe we're going to go with this color right here, and I'll do a fill effect, so we do a fade down. I've got a different format here on this one, so we'll give it a little bit of a light green color. And the row below, I'll do the same, but just a little bit lighter. That way we'll have a nice fade effect throughout the thing. And we'll go, in fact, we'll go all the way over to, let's say, column N. I want to extend this way a little beyond. We're going to use a lot of that, so we'll format those cells and then give it this fill effects here, just a little bit lighter using that medium color. And then we'll do that. Okay, great. So I just want to fill that, and we can also unmerge these, and I'm just going to drag these cells over to extend all the way to, let's just say, add. I've got a really amazing in this. We're going to show you how to get all the contents of a folder inside Excel in a list, and we're going to do that without VBA, at least a portion of it without VBA, and then we'll use VBA to refresh it. So it's going to be really a unique training, something you haven't seen before. And so I'm excited to show that part of you because that's brand new. We have never done that before, to bring in all the contents of a file folder. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I want to bring in a logo now. It's just kind of an expense tracker logo, and I've got one saved here. We're gonna do this really basic here. I'm going to insert a picture here, and I've got a wallet here picture. I'm just going to go with that, something basic there. I want a graph at the top of this. I'm going to increase this one down. There we go. Well, I want a graph at the top of this, something really nice and basic. So let's create a background for that box. So I'm going to insert a shape here, and I'm going to use a rounded rectangle here, and I'm going to start, let's say, around D and go all the way to J, probably down to about, say, 8, something like this. I just want a very slight rounded corner here like this. And then I don't want any borders on it, so I'm going to say no outline, and we're going to give it a shape fill of white. So that's good. I'll put a little bit of a shadow behind it so it looks, so it kind of rays out. So I'm going to put our graph behind that, and I'm going to duplicate that because I want a title, and then I'm going to shrink it up. So I'm going to put this title section up here, and I'm going to bring it up here, and then I want to call this title section something like expense overview. It's in white font now, but I'm going to change it. And I'm going to change it to black font so that obviously it's a... Actually, I'll go ahead and change the background to the green, and then it's going to be... There we go. So that's good. That's what I want to see. But let's give it a title and something like a little bit of a capital. Probably a little bold so it stands out more. So we can see it's going to... There we go, and bold. Okay, that's nice. Expenses overview. Make sure I spelled that right. Overview. Good. All right, so this is where I want our expenses to show up, and I want to put a line graph over here so that it's kind of looks nice and clear, so we can see an overview of our expenses. And we'll get onto that graph shortly. But now that I have that, what I also want is some fields. I want to know by year. So I want to be able to select different years. So we're going to have different years. So let's just say like 2020 or something like that. And then this field, we're going to have different years. So let's color that white because I want the user to be able to select different years from a drop-down list. In fact, we can just go ahead and build that out right now. Out of data validation, I'm going to create a list here, and I'm just going to put in, let's just say 2019, comma 2020 and 2021. Of course, you can customize this any years you want, but I'm just going to put 3 years. So now user can select between the drop-down list. Okay, and then I also want some dates. So I want to be able to enter receipt. So we're going to put in a date here, and then I want to type, and then I want the receipt here also. So the receipt's going to go in H. So I want the total receipt here, and then also I want to know the amount. Of course, we have to know the amount of the expense, and I want the category. This way you can assign categories such as different types of expenses and stuff. We'll create a small list for that. All right, so let's color these. I'm going to put these in white here so we can see them clearly, so we know the user is going to be filling those in. So we're going to go with a white font, and then I want to put a border around them. So I'm going to right click, format those cells, and I'm going to put something a little bit closer to the theme, maybe a light here. Actually fill white, and the border, we're going to go with a border something like a little bit light border, just something really, I'm going to go with a very light theme here, and kind of just not a dark color here. So I want to put the dotted line on the left, and then I'm going to basically do the same thing here under the date here, and then I'm going to right justify these. I should have left justified those. Also going to format those cells to give it a nice look and feel. This is where the user is going to be entering their data so that they can do it. And we'll do a table down below too so that you can see that. And then I'm going to put the left border, top, and the bottom here. Okay, so now we're getting to see our form and how these are going to be the form. So I want this a little bit darker because I want these 5 fields are going to be our form. So I'm going to format those cells. Sorry, it's off the screen. Right click format. I'm going to go with a little bit darker color on here. I'm going to put it in outline. The idea is that I want these forms to be into the user. I'm going to have some buttons up here. Let's create those buttons. We're going to do a very basic button. Let's zoom in here, make this look nice. I want these rounded edges the same, so we can do that. Notice when we shrunk it up, we want the rounded edges, so I want those the same. Let's bring this out a little bit. There we go. We want them matching the top. Looks nice, and all the way to the left. Okay, good. So we get a nice view. Now what I want to do is I want to create some buttons. So again, I'm going to insert shapes here, and I'm going to use the rounded rectangle. And then this one, I'm just going to use we're not going to use icons today. We're just going to use something really, really basic, something really nice, and that it looks good. And we'll go with an orange because I want to stand out in this case. And then no outline. And then what do I want there? I want to put add expense. So I'm going to use a plus, add expense. This one we're going to keep it really, really simple. Give it that kind of a flat design. It's going to kind of look cool, something a little bit different. And then we'll right justify it, and then I'll make it a little bit bigger and then bold. In fact, let me make those. That's a little bit too big, but I'm going to shrink it up, and I'm going to make them capitals. Because because I want to. So we'll make it a little bit smaller. I don't want it that big. All right, that looks pretty good. And bring it down. Okay, I also want to do the same thing. I want to check for receipts. I want to know if we're going to be having receipts. So there's going to be receipts stored in the folder, and we need to know, are there any receipts? Check for receipts. In fact, let's not do this. Let's make a dynamic button, even better. I'm going to make this green. What if we have a button that has different text based on whether there's receipts or not? So let's do that. We're going to have this is going to be dynamic text, but we'll just keep this temporarily. But I'm going to show you how to create a dynamic text, because if there are receipts in the folder that need to be brought, I want this to say there are 6 receipts, or review 6 receipts, or something like that. So we'll put that in. So it's just temporary, but it's looking good so far. We're going to put a graph up here. Let's start to build out our table. Now I want an expenses table here. So I'm going to put this as our expenses. So I'm going to merge and center this, and then create expenses. And I want all the expenses here. So we'll have, let's say, date, amount, type, category, and then receipt location. And then I want probably a picture. I want a picture of the receipt right here. So we'll have this all stored in the table down below. Let's zoom out a little bit so we can see that. Okay, so we've got that. So let's center that, and I'll give it a bit of a format. So I'm going to format those cells. I'm just right clicking. It's a little bit off the screen, but all I'm doing is right clicking and going to format cells. You know how that is. So I'm going to give it a fill effects of a lighter color, basically the same thing what we've done, using the same theme that we have, going from the medium to the very light. And on the top one, I'm going to go just a little bit darker. So on this top one, I'm going to do it a little bit darker. Format the cells. Also keep in mind that there's a free download just with the links down in the description. Every once in a while there are some issues, you know, maybe I missed something in these live videos or something, you never know. And so, but of course I always make sure there's a corrected version available to download, and it's a free download. Just check the links in the description, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. Format the cells. Again, we're going to go with the border. And so there'll always be a downloaded version for you. I make sure to get that to you each and every week. Okay, give it just a basic border. There we go. So it gives you a nice, and now we can color this just something basic. So I'll go with a white background, and I want to go with a border. Format. Let's scroll up. So let's go up here. And then we're going to format those cells, just something basic so that we can get by. And then what I'll do is I'm going to put a thick border on here, and then I want the top and the bottom here like that, something like that. There we go. That's nice. So we can really stand out. We can really see it. I'm going to bring this down here. All right, so we've got our basic covered now. We've got everything pretty much covered. Now we can start to build out the formulas and the formats and the named ranges. We also have to add a lot of named ranges because I want to make sure that all the expenses get tracked, and to make sure that everything is going to be synced completely. And we have going to be a really great formula that we're going to show you how to bring those names, receipts, into the formula. Okay, I'll just add no fill on that. Okay, so now everything's consistent. So we're starting to build it out. Let's see what we want to put inside this hidden admin area. First, I want to know if it's a folder receipt. We're going to be loading, so you can basically add expenses whether they're with or without a receipt, but I need to know that because I need to know whether we're going to have a link. So I'm just going to put folder receipt, and it's going to be just a true or false, something like that. We need to know. We also need to know if it's a new expense. So let's just put new receipt, and that's going to be Boolean, true or false. Also, I want to know how many receipts to review. How many do we need to review? This is going to help us build out our button text. Do we have 4 receipts in the folder that we need to review? Do we have 20? Do we have none? I need to know that, and we're going to use a formula on that. Okay, I need to know the button text. That's in button text. This is going to be our dynamic text. Let's call this button text. So what I want to know is, I'll go through that formula shortly, but then also I need to know the selected row. When we select a row from this table, I need to know. So for example, let's say it's 21. I would need to know that, and we're going to highlight it based on that. I also want some months. We're going to be tracking how much per month, so we need to know the month. So let's just put months here, and months here, and the amount per month. I'm just going to use short names on these because we don't have a lot of space. So all you need to do is use a short name, is just scroll down January all the way to December here. And then I want a total here. Well, I want the total amount here. So it's going to be basically equals the sum of whatever all these months are. And then we'll add in those formulas once we get some amounts. Okay, great. So we want the sum of all of that. So it's starting to come together now. And let's color these so we know we can decipher exactly what they are, and then give it some borders. And the same thing for here, just so we can color it in borders. And I'm going to left justify this so we can see it. All right, it's coming together now. We're going to start out with some formulas, but we really need some data to start with. I've got some data actually. I'm going to put it right here. I've got some data right here. I'm going to copy that data, just some basic data. I'm going to put it right in here, and I'm going to paste it in here. And then of course we do need formats, don't we? So we need these date formats. So I'm going to format this as a short date, and I'm going to format this as an amount. Okay, good. It's starting to look nice together. We're getting an idea, and let's make this bold so it stands out a little bit more. Control B will get us there. Let's add some types and categories. We need some lists, and we also need some named ranges too. Let's create a dynamic named range for our expense date table. So let's do that. Let's just highlight some cells. Go into the name range, go into the formulas here, name manager here, and go new. And I want to create it using offset. So we'll just call this expense date. And then tab down, and we'll start it out with offset. And we're going to include the header, but we don't want to include it in case there's no data. We want to make sure there's no errors. Including the header is going to help us, but we also have to go one row down. And then comma, comma, count A. I want to count all the text. I also want to include the headers too. I don't want to include, but I want to make sure we exclude it. We're including the headers because when there's no data, there's no error. But we also have to, let's just use a high row, 999. And then what I want to do is I want to subtract 1 from here. So we're going to count A, and then -1, and then comma 1. That's just the column. Tab out. Tab back in. Make sure the dancing ants cover all of our data. That lets us know that our formula is correct. It is correct. So let's do that. Now let's do another one for amount. So new, and then we'll just call this amount. Let's call it expense amount. And then we're going to tab over. And what data we want? Well, we want, again, equals offset. And I want to start out in the header, but then I want to go one row down, comma, comma, count A. What are we counting? We're counting all of the data, including the header, but subtracting 1, again, 999. And then close parentheses, -1, because we're going to take 1 out from the header, comma 1. And then end parentheses, tab out, tab in, make sure that encompasses all our data. Great. Okay, now that we have our data, now that we have our formulas, we can start to build out our graph here. So let's do that. Let's start with some months. I want to know how much in January. We want a formula actually that's going to total all these amounts, but only in the month of January. So how do we do that? Well, let's give it a start. We know, what do we know? I know this is month 1, right? And I know it's on row 1. So how do we get that? So what is the formula that we're going to use? We're going to use SUMIFS equals SUMIFS. Yeah, that's right. We can use SUMIFS. Could be multiple criteria. But what is the sum range? The sum range is, of course, our expense amount. Expense amount, that's what we just created in name range. And what is the first criteria? It's going to be based on the date. So expense date is what we're going to be focused on. And what is that? It's going to be the first criteria of that is going to be greater than or equal to the 1st of the month, or January in this case for this row. And what is that? The date of what? January. We want the year. We've got the year here, F4, to make sure it's absolute. Comma, now what is the month? Well, the month here is January. We can't use the word January. We can use 1, which is the first month of the year. So how do we get 1? We know it's row 11. So how do we go from 11 to 1? Well, we just subtract 10. So row, which is 11, minus 10 is going to get us 1. Now we have the month. What about the date? That's going to be 1. All right, great. So that is our first criteria. What about our second? Our second criteria is going to be, we want that to be less than or equal to the end of the month. So how do we write that? Well, first of all, the criteria in this case, of course, is the same, which is expense date. We have that. And what about the criteria for that? Quotation, less than or equal to, and the end of the month. We're going to use EO month for that. Again, the start date in this case would be date. What is the year? Same year. And we're going to use that. Make sure we're going to F4 to automatically absolute, comma. What is the month? Same month as before as we did. In this case, it's going to be row minus 10. That's going to get us 1, and it's going to allow us to drag it down. Comma, what is the day? 1. Okay, so we got the end of that month. And in this case, we wanted to number of month would be 0. So we're going to close that out. Now we have the end of the month, and now we're going to close out our SUMIFS. So we hit enter, and we see it's 25, which is exactly what we want. If we were to change this to 115, we see that it changes to 37, which is exactly what we want. Okay, great. So we have our formula working, and if we've made sure we have absolute on what we need to, which is E10 to keep that consistent, now all we need to do is drag that formula down to all of our months, and it's going to automatically appear. Excellent. Looking really good. We don't have any data for May, which is correct. No data. In fact, we can just change this to 5/5 so we can get data in May. And we have a total here. Excellent. All right, let's now, since we have our data, we can build out our graph, our little graph here, our little line chart. It's going to be really nice. Let's go ahead and insert that. Let's highlight all the data here, not including the totals yet, and we're going to insert. And I'm just going to go for a basic column, something really simple like this, but I want to change the look and feel. I don't really want it to look exactly like this. We're going to update it because I want to keep it very simple. So to do that, let's get rid of this series. We don't need that. I'll just hit click delete on that. I also want to change the color of this. So I'm going to right click and go to format the data series, and I'm just going to go to the fill. I want a solid fill, maybe just something consistent like this green here would be perfect. I want it green consistent. Okay, now I also don't want this border around here, so we can right click and then go to, again, format the chart area, go to border, and then just click no line. There we go. Now we got something very nice. Now I also want the total. What is the total of this? So let's create something to link this total. I want to know the total. So insert, I'm going to insert, in this case, a text box, and I'm going to link that text box to the total. So I'm going to put it right here, and I'm going to say equals, what do I want? It equals the total, and this is going to be this one, B23. So now we have it. Now all we need to do is format B23 as a currency, because I want it formatted as a currency. Nice. And we can get rid of the borders here. Shape fill, we'll do no fill on this, and we'll do no outline on this one. But I need to know what that is. Also, let's increase the font a little bit, make it bold so we can clearly see it. Stretch it out a little bit. And what is this? Let's add another text box here so we know what it is. Just call this annual total. Annual total. Okay, that looks nice. And then we can center this just so we get an idea of how it's coming. I'm going to also center this one so they're both centered. And then make this a little bit bold here. Okay, now they're both bold, and we just get rid of the border on this one. I don't need a border on this. Very good. Now we got our format all filled out, and we got our design really set up. We can add some more formulas in here. Looking really good. Now let's see, how do we get this? I also want another button here. I also want to duplicate this and just put save expense. So something like save expense. And we can actually add a check mark into here, just like we do if we did. Let's add a space. We can do insert. You know, sometimes we add logos, but this time let's just do a symbol, something, keep it simple. Let's add this symbol right here so we don't have to add logos. Okay, good. We stretch the button out a little bit. Save expense. Well, it looks kind of nice. All right, and let's add title to this as we do. Save expense button, and then we'll just call this one add expense button. Add expense button. Okay, so we've clearly labeled our, and then we'll have this called check receipt button. Okay, good. So we've got all our buttons labeled so we know when we're going to say them. And now we're only going to show the save and the add not at the same time, so we can put them over on the top of each other. I also want to remove this and format the grid line, so we don't need any grid lines, just have a nice clean look. Excellent. Now it's looking nice. And I'm going to group all of these together, the graph, everything together, so we can move them all together. It's going to be very nice. That way we can shrink them down, and we'll shrink them a little bit. And what I also want to do is I want to list out all the files. Now I've got a folder here of all the receipts. Let's take a look at this. I've got a bunch of receipts here, and I've also got an archive folder. So what I want to do is I want to link this folder. So to do that, I'm going to show you how to link the folder and all the recipients and how to load that. So I'm going to copy this folder, and then we're going to go down into put that file folder in a specific file, and I'm going to put that probably in over here into, let's just say L2 here. And what I'm going to do is I want every single file in that folder. So to get that, I'm going to use a special formula. I'm going to use the backslash, and then I'm going to use the asterisk, which is going to denote every single file. How do I list the files? I want a list of all the files in that folder, and I want to put them right here and in. So how do I get that? Well, the first thing what we do is we have our file path right here in L2. So how do we get all the files? Well, we can use the named range for that plus a formula, and I'll show you how to do that. So into the formulas name manager, we're going to create a brand new one. We're going to call it list files. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a refers to. What is it? It's going to be equals files. What are the files? It's going to be the files of L2, all the files of L2. Then we're going to use index to pull those and extract those out. So click OK and click close. So now that we've created the name, now all we need to do is create an index. Equals index. What are we indexing? We're indexing the list files. That's just the one we created. And what is the row number? Well, the row number is the index number, right? The files go from 1, 2, 3, 4. So we just simply need to number those the same as the row number. To do that, we just type in row and then open and close parentheses and then close the parentheses out. That's going to get us our first. Look, receipt 16, that is the same exact file here. Receipt 16. So when we drag it down, it's going to show 17, 12, and 13 right below it. So all I need to do is copy the formula and bring it all the way down here and paste the formula in. Excellent, except I don't like this ref. So how do we do that? We'll just wrap that in if error. So if error, and then we'll just go to the end, comma, and then just leave it blank, or we can put it to 0, I guess. And that's it. So then we can close the parentheses. So now when we drag it down or copy and paste the formula down, we won't show that error. Paste formula, great. So now we have a list of our files. Perfect. So now we can take that, combine with this, and create our receipt image and put it in here. So now how do we do that? How do we show the picture? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that with just a little VBA code. Now that we have the file, now that we have all the files, we can go through these files and bring these into our application and then show the receipts and then enter the information. So let's see how are we going to do that. Well, the first thing I want to do is bring those pictures in with just a little bit of VBA code. Let's go into the VBA code and show you exactly how we're going to do that. So inside the VBA code, here we're going to create a module. So insert a module, and I'll just call this expense macros. So in the properties, we're going to name this, call this expense macros. And I'll put all the macros right here, make it easier just so we can see them all. I want to show the pictures and enlarge, and I also want to show them down here under the table here. In fact, here in the picture location, I'm going to create a nice picture for that. So we can change this actually to the gray font and show that, and then format, we don't need that. Let's put the picture in here. So we'll remove the borders here, and then we'll show it nice, and we can add a left border here, and then a right border, and then a bottom, so we can show the picture when we select on it. It's going to be great, but we need to get rid of this bleed. So that's the end. So we can just use a space, and that's going to do it. Drag that space down here so it clears it. Now we have room. So when I select, I want to show a nice picture here. When I'm working on something, I want to show a larger picture here. So what we need to do is we need to get this information. When we check for the receipt, I need to bring this file. We're going to start at the end. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. Bring this file into the receipt and display the picture. I really need to know how many receipts that we're going to bring in. I want this button to say 6 receipts or something like that. How many receipts? I want it to display a dynamic contents of this button to let me know how many receipts that I need to review. So how do we do that? When we have dynamic content that we want words on a button, we can use this to link it to a cell. So how do we do that? We can use count A, count the text. So equals count A. What are we counting? We're counting all the list files. What's that going to get us? 4. That's exactly what I want. Perfect. So 4. So now we know this is 4, but if there's no list files, I need to also count if it's 0. Remember, these are zeros, so it could be 0. So how do we know if it's not 0? We should count those too, just in case, to make sure it's not 0. Well, to count all the non-zeros, what I really want to do is once this gets down to 0, it's still going to count 0. So we want to make sure that we're not counting 0. So how can we do that? I want to make sure that if we're counting all the non-zeros. So equals if, count if, in this case, just to make sure, let's include the range. What is the range here? I want to make sure that we include the full range starting at N1 all the way down, or however long we want to go. And then in this case, we're going to use comma, and in this case would be does not equal 0. So does not equal 0, then only then do we want to count those files. Otherwise, just put 0. Okay, add the parentheses here, comma. Okay, good. Well, I want to check how many receipts that we need to review. So let's put in a formula in here. Okay, so what is the formula that we want to put in here? I want to put in a dynamic text. So basically, if there's no receipts, I want to put check for receipts. If there are receipts, I want to list how many receipts there need to be checked. So we can use a formula based on the value, what's in B6. So what is that formula? Let's type that in. Equals if, and then B6 equals 0. If it's 0, then we're going to put in check for receipts. What if it's not 0? If it's not 0, then I want to list how many receipts. So then in that case, B6 and quotation space receipts to review. So that way we've got a dynamic text. Now all we need to do is link this button with whatever's in B7. We can do that with a formula, equals, and then just click B7, and that's going to link it automatically. So now it shows that we have 4 receipts to view. So all we need to do is just make that font white again and bold. And there, now we have 4 receipts to review. So it's perfect. So we know now that as soon as this changes, when all of these get reviewed, it's going to go to 0, and this text is going to change. Perfect. So now we're ready to go in and add some VBA so we can get this working just right. All right, so let's get on that. Inside your VBA, we've created, of course, a macro. I just have one module here, no problem. And we're ready to start out. Let's add some code to save it. Variables that we're going to use throughout all the macros. Expense row as long, receipt row as long. And then, of course, we're going to use the picture path as string, and receipt folder as string. So we're going to use those throughout all the macros. So it's better to dimension up. What's the first one? I want to check and review receipts. So sub check and review receipts. Okay, so what this is going to do is going to check. So the first thing we want to do is to make sure with sheet 1, that's what we're focused on for this training. And I want to enable calculations. What that's going to do is automatically calculate that formula. That index formula is only going to get calculated when we do something in VBA. Otherwise it won't. So let's enable calculation equals false and then make it true again. That's going to force the calculation of the sheet. Enable calculation and then equals true, and then calculate. That's going to force it. Calculate. Okay, let me show you why that is. Let's move one of these into the archive. Okay, so now we only have 3. But if you take a look here in our sheet, it doesn't update. I need this to update. Let's take a look at this. Let's bring it down here so you can see everything on the screen. Notice it didn't update. Even when I calculate the sheet, formulas calculate or calculate now, it doesn't update. So how do we get VBA will help us update it? So watch, as soon as I bring this down and run this macro, we're going to see that it calculates. So I'll bring this down for you, shrink it up a little bit, and as soon as we run this, it's going to calculate. You see how those receipts automatically change to just 3 now? So this code's going to help us calculate. It keeps track of all of the receipts that we need. All right, so we understand that. So that's why we have to add that part of the code. So let's continue on with the receipt code, and we know why we're adding it now. Next up, I want to check if B6, I want to know if there's receipts that need to be added. Is B6 0 or not? That's going to tell us whether we need to add receipts. If .range B6.value is greater than 0, then we know we need to add receipts. So let's just put receipts to add. Next up, what do we want to do? I'm going to run a macro, of course, to add a new receipt. So let's just put an add new receipt. And I want to make sure that we create a macro with the same name. So I'm going to copy that and go below this and just put in sub add new receipt. So that's going to create a sub. We don't have any code there, but I want to make sure that we run that. I also want to know the receipt row. What row are we on? The receipt, I'm going to track that. We've defined it up there, RECPT row equals, what's it going to equal? It's going to equal whatever is in B6, range B6. Why B6? Because B6 is going to tell us, as we selected, B6 is always going to tell us the last row always, because we know it's number 3. So as we reduce it, remember this was 4, but we just moved one. So B3 is always going to tell us what row. As we add it, we're going to add it from the bottom on up. As we each add them, we're going to move it to the archive. And as we move it to the archive, it's going to be 1 less. So that's going to really help us. So we're going to start out there. And then we'll use this as the last row. So we're going to add them from the bottom up. So we need that to add it. So we need that row. That's important because I need to bring in all the name. I need to bring in the name in that full file path. I need to put it in right here. So we're going to do that with this training B6. Okay, so we're going to call that the receipt row. Next up, what do I want to do? Now I want to make sure that we have our entire file path. I want to add this whole path. We know the folder, right? We know this is the folder, and we know the picture name here. So how do we combine those? Well, I can combine this along with that, but I need to make sure that we don't include this asterisk here. It's important for our formulas. We need it for here, but we don't need it inside our large file name. So let's get rid of that and combine them and get rid of the asterisk. So we can do that with some code. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to say dot range I12. That's where we're putting it. I12 dot value equals. Why I12? This is I12. I'm going to put it in this cell right here. Okay, so I12 equals, what is it going to equal? It's going to equal basically whatever's in L2, because that's our long folder, but not just dot range L2. But remember, we have to remove that asterisk. So I have to replace something. So I'm going to replace it. It's going to be equals replace. And what are we replacing? We're replacing the asterisk. So comma and then the asterisk here. What are we replacing with? Nothing. Okay, so now we have the folder path. So and what? And the file name. We know it's in N dot range N. And what? And in the receipt row. We know remember, let's string this up so you can see it a little bit. We're not going to need that. We can bring it down here. We're not going to need that much. So N and the receipt row. We know the receipt row in this case is 3. And receipt row. All right, great. So we know that. So I12, the file path, is going to be, again, basically it's going to be this entire L2, whatever's in L2, not including the asterisk, plus this. That will build out our, we're just going to put it right here, our full file path. I want to display the picture here into K, and I want to get ready to put in the date, the type, the amount, and the category. Okay, so to do that, we can just continue building out. So now we're done with that. We've built it out, and we can say before, I want to set the folder receipt to true. I want to know that the receipt is coming from the folder. So I want to set a setting here. Folder receipt B4 must be true. So let's go change that. So we know dot range B4 equals true. Set folder receipt to true. We know that's going to help us because we need to know where that receipt came from. It came from our receipt folder. Okay, next up, I want to just run a macro that actually displays. Now we have the file. Now we can display the macro, but I want to use that a macro for that. So we're going to run a macro called display main picture. And let's build out that macro so we can see it. So I'm going to copy that again, and we're going to add it to here. Paste it, display main picture. So we'll add that in as well. What else do we need to do? Okay, so what if B6, what if there are no receipts to add? Then we need to add an else. Else, in case there are no receipts to add. Then what do I want to do? In that case, I want to hide these rows. I only want to show these rows if there's receipts to add. I want to hide 12 through 14. So we're going to hide that, maybe even 11 through 14. We don't need that. We don't need the 2 extra spaces. So let's hide those rows if there's no. I want it to look like this, nice and clean, right? I don't want it to show anymore. Maybe 11 through, maybe one other one. So I want it to look like this, and nice and even. And make sure that we also size these buttons accordingly. We don't want them to size with the cells. So I'm going to right click everything and then go into properties and make sure that we set the properties to move but don't size with cells. Okay, so I want to hide 11 through 14. So how do we do that? We can just do that with one line of VBA code right here. Else dot range 11 and what? In the colon, right? And then quotation marks and 14. And then of course entire row hidden equals true. Dot entire row dot hidden equals true. That's going to hide them all. Hide rows for receipt entry. We only want to show those when we're actually entering receipt. Next up, I just want to put a little message box. There are no receipts to enter, or we can put review, to review. Let the user know there's no, and then of course I want to set the folder receipt to false. Dot range B4 value equals false. And why are we doing that? Why are we setting B4 to false? Because I want to make sure that we know that there's no folder receipts that are coming in. That'll help us later on when we know what, because we're going to display receipts based on whether they're selected here or whether they're selected. I'm going to display them here and here. We got lots of receipts to display just so we can see them very easily. All right, next up, what else do we have to do? We're done with that little macro, so let's create some more. What about when we add a new receipt? We started that, let's continue that right now. When we add a new receipt, we just need to clear some fields. So with sheet 1, what are we going to do? We're going to basically, I want to make sure that we show rows 11 through 14. We need to make sure 11 through 14 are not hidden. We want to give the user the ability to add in these fields. So we need to make sure that 11 through 14 are not hidden. And we can do that just simply by unhiding them. And in this case, it would be false. So all we need to do is copy this, paste it here, and put in false, unhide rows. Now that we've done that, what else do we need to do? I need to make sure that we've checked to see if B6 value is greater than 1. Then we want to show the save and next. I'm going to have the user the ability to save and next. So let's duplicate this button, and I want to give them also the ability to go save. And this one's not going to be linked, so let's not link that. This one, user going to be able to enter the text, so call this save and next. And then just give them a little arrow. Save and next. This way they can continue to move through the receipts. So we'll give them that ability. Great. All right, what is next? Next up, I want to show that button. Let's give that button a name so we clearly know. We'll call this save next button. If .range B6 .value is greater than 0, then what do we want to do? Then .shapes save next button .visible equals MSO true equals visible, else of course it's not visible, right? We don't want to show it if there's no receipts that are going to be, else make that invisible. Hide that shape if there's no receipts equals MSO false. Okay, so we're just going to basically, let's just write into show or hide review receipts button, and basically that button's just going to simply save the receipt and move on. So now we're going to show it. Now that we do it, now we just want to clear some fields, right? When we're adding a new receipt, I want to make sure that these fields are all clear. So let's do that right now. Let's clear those. And what fields are they? .range E12, I guess we have. Let's move this over so we can see what we're looking at here. Bring it down here, and then we can bring this up here. E12, we have E12, we have G12, and I'll go through these in a second. E14, we have G14, and we have I12. Let's just go through those, and we're going to clear the contents. Clear contents. Clear fields. Let's review that, double check. We have E12, we have E14, we have G12, G14, and we have I12. Those 5 fields we want to clear. What else do we want to do? Well, I want to make sure that we're showing some buttons and hiding other buttons. So let's take a look at these buttons. I want to save this button here, and I want to hide this button. Show and hide shapes accordingly. .shapes save expense button .visible equals MSOC true, right? I want to display the save button, and I want to hide the add new. .shapes add new button, or what was the name of it? I don't remember. Let's just take a look. Also in the file, we can select files. We called it add expense button. So we want to make sure the add expense button is hidden. Expense button .visible equals MSO false. So we're hiding false. Hide add new button. Make sure we comment out, and then show save button. That's going to be for add new. And then I want to just select, let the user know we're going to select, let's say E12, select E12. So we can write some code for that. And that'll be it. .range E12, and then select. Gives the user the ability. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Let's run that code and see if there's any issues with that. save our file first before running our code, run that. All right, take a look. All right, that looks good. All the fields are cleared out. Our save and next is showed up. We have 3 receipts to view, save expenses. So let's move this over and add that macro, assign the macro, and now this is called add new receipt. So when we click that button and add expense, all right, now that it's working perfectly. So it's ready to add new expenses. Now let's assign the macro to the 3 receipts to review. So right click, assign the macro, and we'll call this check and review receipt. So click on that, and we'll click on that, and it's nice. Now we have the full file path, the correct file path here where we want to, and we're ready to enter new. All right, we'll click check and review, and we'll take a look at that. All right, now we have save expense, save and next, 3 receipts to review. We've already added the macro. Right click, assign the macro, recheck and review. That's going to get assigned there. Everything is looking very good. We are ready to move on. What I want to do is I want to display the picture. I want to display it right here. So let's write some code to display it. We now have the full file name. So let's go back into the macro and write the code so we can display that picture. So let's write some code. We'll scroll down here. Let's create some code to display that. Sub display main picture. There's going to be one in the table too that I want to display, so I want to make sure to differentiate between those two with sheet 1. If there's already a picture, I want to delete it, so we need to check that. On error, resume next, so just in case there is no picture. What is that picture? Dot shapes, and we'll call it receipt pic. And then I want to make sure that's deleted. Anytime we add a picture, I want to make sure that any existing one is deleted. So we can do that. And then on error 0, that's going to check, because if there is no picture, it would cause an error. So next up, we're ready to go. I want to make sure if we're going to display a picture, we need to make sure that I12 is not empty. So that's the first thing we want to check. If .range I12 .value equals empty, then exit sub. Right? We can't do anything if there's no picture. Next up, picture path is equal to, of course, I12. So we can copy that. We just wrote it here. Remember, we defined picture path as a string up at the top here. Remember, it's all the way up here, picture path here. So we've already defined that as a string. So that is going to be the picture path. Next up, what I want to do is I want to run another check to make sure that that's accurate. It's an accurate path. Otherwise, it'll create an error. So we can do if directory of picture path dot VB directory, that's the directory, equals nothing, or empty in this case, double quotes, then exit sub, because we not only do we need a path, but we need an accurate path. Sub exit on incorrect file name. Okay, file name. Okay, so now that we know it's correct, now we're ready with, what are we inserting? We're inserting a picture. Dot pictures dot insert picture path. We're going to insert that picture path, and then of course with the shape range we need to do a few things. I want to lock the ratio, right? So we can do that with lock aspect ratio equals MSO true, and lock that aspect ratio. What else do I want to do? Height, and maybe around 350 equals 350. And then of course I want to set the name. Name is going to be equal to receipt pic. Always a specific name. Okay, so now we have it. Now we've set the name and everything. Now we can work with it. Once we've set, now we can close out these two end widths and focus on our picture in itself. So width dot shapes, the one we just created, receipt pic, what are we going to do with it? We're going to do a few things. We're going to place it. Where do I want to place it? Dot left, I want to place it right around sheet 1 dot range K4 K4 dot left, and also want to do the same thing with the top. Dot top sheet 1 dot range K4 dot top. Okay, so that's going to place it. Now we've set the size and the place, and then I want to put, just in case there's an error up here, always good, on error go to no pic, just in case there's an error to avoid some errors. And we can go down here, just put no pic. Okay, so we can close up that. We're pretty much done with that. We can run our code, check for errors, and see if our picture is displayed. We already have the file path, so we can shrink this up and then run this code, and then we already added a macro for this one here. We don't need that. Okay, so and then run it here, and then we just have dot left. We forgot the equals. Increment doesn't use equals, but dot left and dot top does use equals. Okay, there we go. Now our receipt is nicely. So now when we load our receipt, it's going to display this nice receipt. That's exactly what I want. Now what do I need to do? So the receipt's displayed, the user can see the receipt. Now all they need to do is enter the values and then save the value, right? So put in their type. We want to type and we need a category. Let's add some types in there. Let's just take this type here. We can just put in 3 types. Let's add a list here, somewhere in here. It can be, we can put it anywhere really. And actually we can bring these out a little bit and put in our list. I'll put in our types here, and I'm just going to paste in the values here. Just anywhere we can paste those values in. Okay, so I'm going to call these types, and then we're going to I also want categories too. Categories here, so we can shrink this up and put in some categories. I'll put them in here, categories, and I'll just copy and paste them and then reduce the duplicates, so we can do those. And then paste them in here. All right, so we have professional fees, entertainment, and then business. Okay, perfect. That's enough for now. You get the idea. We can delete these duplicates here. So we have categories too. Let's add this, categories. And of course, you can add your own. And now that we have this, I'm going to add some data validation here. Data validation, list here, and call this categories. And then this would be type. Data validation, and then list. Then we have our types, equals types. Okay, so we have our type and we have our categories here and we have our amount. Now what do I need to do? Now I need to save it. We need to save it. We can also format this as a, all right, looking very good. Now all we need to do is write the macro to save it. So let's write the macro and save this. Now I want to use the same macro for both save expenses and save index. There's actually going to be the same macro that runs both of those. So keep that in mind as we build out this macro. Back into the VBA code, let's expand this so you can see more of the screen. And we'll add some additional, scroll up. We've got review, we've got add new, and down here we will put in a new macro, and we're going to call this save expenses, sub save expenses. And we're going to, of course, we're with sheet 1. We're focused on sheet 1. We want to make sure that we have some required information. We got to at least make sure that there's a date here. That date is very important, and we also need to make sure that there's an amount. So we need to make sure that at least E12 and E14 have value. So that's the first thing we're going to do, just to check. If .range E12 .value equals empty, or of course E14 equals empty. If either one of those are empty, then we need to let the user know. So E14 equals empty, then what? Then message box, please fill in the required date, let's just capitalize date and amount fields. Exit sub. Okay. So at least they can add, at least they know they must add those because those are too important. Also, I need to know, is this a new expense or is it an existing? If they click here, it's going to load the expenses. So I need to know, is it a brand new one or is it an existing? We knew that we will know that using what is in B5. If B5 is true, we'll know that it's a new expense because we need to know the row. The row is either going to be here, 21, or it's going to be the first available row, in this case 24. So knowing whether it's a new receipt or an existing one that we may have loaded above, it's going to help us. So B5 is going to tell us just that. If .range B5 .value equals true, then it's a new receipt. Else existing. And if. Okay, so now we need to, so now that we know, we just need the expense row is equal to, remember expense row has been defined up here, expense row as long equals, if it's a new one, we're just going to find the first available. So that would be .range, and we'll use D and then just use a large value 999, and then end XL up .row plus 1 .end XL up not down dot row plus 1. Dot row will get us the last row of the value, plus 1 will be the first available row. Okay, so we have the expense row if it's a new receipt, but what about if it's an existing? Well, if it's existing, it's going to be located in B8. Expense row equals dot range B8 value. B8, it's always going to keep track of our, and I'll show you how we're going to do that, existing row. Basically, what's going to happen is it's very simple. If the user selects on here, this is going to change. We can write that right now, make it very easy. Let's add some conditional formatting. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to highlight these cells, and I'm going to go to Home, Conditional Formatting, Manage Rules. I want to know what row they've selected. New rule, use a formula, equals B8 equals row. That's probably easier, row. So when that happens, what do I want? I want it to show something very distinct. I'm going to set a distinct fill color, fill effects. I'm going to do the same theme using these two colors as a little bit lighter, darker. And then I'm also going to change the font to white and to bold so it'll show up. Okay. Great. So now when the user selects on it, we'll add some code. When they select on it, now we know the row is very, very clear. Okay, so let's continue with the save and then we'll do the load after that. So we'll continue with this so we can finish. So now we've defined the expense row, whether it's new or existing. Now everything else is the same, right? Everything else in the macro is the same. So all I essentially want to do, we won't use data mapping. There's only 4 or 5 fields here. So basically what I want to do is when we're saving, I want to bring this, the date, down to whatever the row is. I want to bring the amount down to whatever the row, and the type and the category and the receipt. So all 5 of those basically need to be saved down to whatever row, whether it's an existing or new row. If it's a new row, it's going to be saved right here. So how do we do that? Well, just very simple. We could just write some code. Dot range D, of course, that's the date, and the expense row dot value. What does it equal? Equals dot range E12, and that's the date. Now let's take a look at that. D in the expense row equals D12. D in the expense row equals D12. Perfect. So now all we need to do is write similar code. We can copy and paste this for the remaining 4 to 5 fields. I think it's 5 total. Date, so we have date. E would, of course, that would be amount. What's next? The next one would be type. Next one would be category. And then I'm going to write in another one for, of course, we need the receipt name, but I want to write in there. That would be the file path for the receipt because I want to save that too. So let's update our, this would be E, F, G, and H. Okay, and I skipped a row purposely. So now we just need to update these. This would be E14, E14, G12, G12, and then we have G14. So that's going to map, like a map, but it's actually, instead of mapping, we're typing it out in this case. But I only want to add a receipt from the archive if the receipt from the folder moved to the archive folder, right? Not only do I need to take this receipt, I want to put it into the archive folder, right? Because it's already been, I don't want to track them in this folder anymore. These are only for receipts that we have not recorded yet. That's how we can keep track, and we still have an archive of folders here. But I want to make sure, so the first thing I want to do is I want to see if B4 is true. If B4, how do we know B4? B4 is going to tell us if it's a folder from the receipt. Remember that? So we can check for that. I want to know that. So if dot range B4 equals true, that means it's a receipt from the receipt folder. Then it's a receipt. We could just put in a little note here, receipt from folder. Then we can add it, because if there's no receipt from folder, we don't need to do anything there. So in that case, what do we want to do? Well, in that case, what I really want to do is I want to move it to the archive folder. First, we're going to define the receipt folder. Where is it located in the receipt folder? We've defined that up here, the receipt folder here, all the way up here. I'm going to just double check it. REC, copy that just to make sure I get the name right. And I think I had it right already. Receipt folder equals what? The receipt folder, again, is in L2, of course, without the asterisk. So we're going to replace, what are we replacing? We're going to replace dot range L2 dot value. We're going to get rid of that asterisk because that's going to, we don't need that inside the folder path. And we're going to replace that with nothing. Okay, so that's going to get us our receipt folder. So now once we have the receipt folder, let's move this down here. We're going to define this here. So I want to define it. Let's get rid of this. So what does H? H, of course, is the receipt folder, RE, plus it's more. It's also the archive folder, right? Plus and, so and the archive. Let's put that in the archive. And also the file name. And what is the file name? How do we know the file name? So basically, well, I want to build the link. I want to build this link right here, this link right here. So I want the original folder, I want the archive name, and I want the name. How do I get the name? Well, I know the receipt row. Remember, it's in B6. So if I know the receipt row, all I need to do is get the name from here, in this case N3, N, and the receipt row, in case N3. That's going to get us our receipt name, so we can add that name. And so dot range N and the receipt row. We'll just define that receipt row. We still have to do that. Receipt row. So let's do that. Of course, we have to do it before. What is the receipt row? Receipt row is equal to, very simply, dot range B6 row. Okay, so we have the receipt row here, right, in B6. We know that that's the receipt row. That's going to help us get the name. We need to extract the name and put that full file path down here into the archive. So we've done that now. We know the receipt row. We know that's going to put our full file path in column H. That's exactly what I want. I also need to make sure that the archive folder actually exists, and we can do that with VBA. If it doesn't exist, we can create it. Let's run some code to make sure that that archive folder actually exists. If directory of, what is the receipt folder, and we can just copy this right here actually, dot VB directory. This is going to tell us whether it exists or not. Does not equal empty. Then we need to make it. Then make a directory. And what are we going to make? We just need to make it right here. Just copy this and we can make the directory. Simply making that folder, we'll do it right here. Then make directory if it doesn't exist. So make directory will do just like that. Then we don't need the backslash there. Make directory. So that line is going to make our folder, create our folder if it doesn't exist. So now that we know it's created, now what I want to do is I want to take this file that's in our folder, I want to take it and I want to move it into our archive, right? I want to take the file and move it in. So we can do that with just one line of code. We can use name as. So in this case, name, and what are we naming? I'm going to do sheet 1. I want to make sure to use sheet 1. It's very important in this case. Dot range I12. Remember, that's the path. That's the path, the current path, I12. Dot value. As, right, we're naming that. That's the current as what? Our new path, which is inside the archive. So it's the original path, then the destination path. Naming as will actually move it. So we can do that. How do we do that? We could just say, again, it's the receipt folder. And this time we're going to include archive, right? Archive. And backslash. And of course the file name. And we have it already right here, so we don't need to do it. We just need to copy that. And that's going to move the file. Move receipt to archive. Archive folder. All right, so that's going to move it over. So now it's moved over. And if, we got the end if. So all of this we're only doing if, of course, there was actually a receipt from the folder. So these lines are just from the receipt folder. So now we can continue on with our code. So what I want to do is I want to check for additional receipts. Check for additional receipts. So the best thing to do is to check again is to enable the calculations just as we did up here. So let's copy and paste that code up here, this one right here. And then just going to bring it down because I'm going to check for additional receipts. Remember, as we move the folder, if we run this code, enable calculation, it's going to update this right here. This list right here is going to be updated. As we move the file out of the folder, this list will be updated. And of course, once this is updated, this will change to 2 and 1 and then 0 eventually. So we're running that code is going to update that. Now we can do that. If dot range B6 dot value does not equal 0, that means there's still receipts in that folder. Then receipts still in the folder to be reviewed. And if, and then else. Okay, so what do we want to do if there's still receipts in the folder? In that case, what I want to do is I want to run the macro called add new receipt. I want to run that, and remember, because we're ready to add a new receipt. We've already created that macro all the way up here, right here, add new receipt. I want to run that macro again. So the first thing I want to do is add that macro. What do I want to do after that? I want to set the receipt row is equal to, of course it's B6, equals dot range B6. That's going to be our receipt row always, because it's our last row. Receipt row. What next? Next up, what I want to do is, again, I want to display the picture from our next receipt. Why do I want to do that? I want to, when I get ready, I want to display the picture so the user knows automatically what is the next receipt. They can see it. They know what to do. So I want to get ready. So I want to, again, in I-12, I want to build that link again. And we can do that. I'm building that link and displaying that picture. So we can do that right here. Dot range I-12 dot value equals, again we're going to do that replace. We've already done it up here, so we can just copy and paste the code. The same thing right here. It's the same as this code right here. Copy that and bring that down, so there's no difference there. So we're going to create that link one more time, and we can also then display the picture. Right now that we have it, I also want to set B4 to true. Dot range B4. That's going to tell us whether it's a receipt from the folder. Dot value equals true. Receipt from folder. Okay, what do I want to do? I'm going to display the main picture again. Display main picture. I'm going to run that macro one more time. Just to make sure that I got the name right, I'm going to make this small p, and as soon as it changes to big, I know that okay, so now it's correct. That means I know that I've got the macro name correct because it changed automatically for me. So then we're going to display the macro that shows that picture. But what do I want to do if there are no more receipts? Well, then I want to basically write some code, because there's no new receipts. In that case, I want to get ready. So dot range B4 is going to go to false because there's no receipts. B4 dot value equals false. Set folder receipt to false. Also, what I want to do, I want to hide the save and next button. So we've already copied our buttons here, so we can just update the save expense and add expense buttons and save and next, these buttons here. Save and next button, that's going to be not visible, so we can copy that down here. Dot shapes visible, right? Hide save and next, because there's no more receipts. Save next button, we don't need that anymore. What else do we want to do? I want to make sure that we're copying these buttons here. I'm going to copy those down here, so we're finished with those. So the save expense button, I want to make sure that's visible, and the add expense button, in this case what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to make that hidden. We're done with the receipts, so we're going to hide the save button, and we're going to show the add new button. Get it all ready, show the add new button, and this would be MSOC true. Show the add new button. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to hide these rows. Once we're done entering receipts, I want to hide rows 11 through 14, and I want to hide, we've already hidden this button, right? The save next button, we've already hidden it here. Save next false. So I just want to hide those rows. So we can do that. We've already created them. Let's just copy those and make it a little bit quicker than me typing it in. These rows, hide rows, I just want to copy that and hide them back again. Okay, so hide rows. We don't need those rows, so we can now hide them. And if there's any pictures here, I want to delete them because there's no more receipts. So on air, go to next, and then dot shapes, receipt, pick, because there's no, we're getting it ready for the next one. So we don't want to delete any pictures that might dot delete, and then on air and go to 0. Okay, on air, go to 0. Perfect. So that's going to hide any pictures. We are done with that code. Let's go ahead and look it over. It's a little bit of a code. Save expenses, and I'm going to save this. Of course, we want to save before running code, and then I'm going to copy this. We don't need to copy it actually. We can just go in and take these two buttons, right? Remember, we're going to hold the shift. These two buttons are both going to get the same macro, so I'm going to assign the macro, and it's going to be save expenses. If we have a lot of macros, then we like to copy and paste the macros. Okay, so let's click it, save and next, and then we just need to finish this RECP, no E on there, continue that, check for any. Again, got a no E, I got to remember my variable numbers. All right, and let's check this, replace folder. This should be equals, obviously. Equals, if it equals 0, then make directory. Okay, not does not equal. All right, that looks good. Now we are done. Now we've shown the picture, we've showed the next picture, and you see we've got one less. So let's see how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a date, 1, 2, enter a type, and enter the amount and the category. And then I'm going to do save and next. Perfect, that went right. Okay, nice, I like that. A little bit more code, we're almost done here. It's looking really good. It's displayed the next one. Now it showed one more receipt to review. What I want to do is when I select here, I want to show that. So let's write some code for that. Back into the VBA, and let's go into the on-sheet code selection change. So basically here, worksheet, selection change. If the user makes a selection anywhere from, let's say, D18 all the way through H and down, if not, selection D18 all the way through, what was that? Let's just go with H999, and I want to make sure there's a value D, and range D and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty. Then what? Then I just basically want to range B8 dot value equals the target dot row. That's where, let's just take a look at that and see how that's working. Nice. Okay, one other thing, I want to display a smaller picture here so we can see what it is. Let's add a small macro for that so I can display that smaller picture here so I know what the receipt is here. Let's move on. Let's write some code for that here. Back into the expenses, and we'll basically, it's going to be almost the same as this, so we'll just copy this and then I'm going to modify it. Call this display main picture, and I'm going to scroll down here and we will call this display table picture so we can differentiate between the two. Display table picture. I'm going to paste that in, okay? And then in this case we're going to call this a little bit different. I'll call this table. We want to make sure we want to give it different names. And then table picture, so we can receipt table pick. Okay, so good. And then of course the location is going to be different. In this case I want to put it into I18. So let's write some code. I18, update I18, and now of course I'm going to move it over a little bit. Not going to keep it in the location is going to come. In this case, the picture path is a little bit different, so let's write some code to do that. First of all, I need the row, right? We need to know what row we selected. Our row is going to come from B8. That's very important. So we can write some code. Let's write the expense row. First of all, if B8 is empty, we can't continue on. So let's write some code for that. We'll change this to B8. B8, because we need an expense row. It's empty, and it's a expense row is equal to B8. B8 is our expense row. That's going to help tell us where our file path is. Equals B8 expense row. That's the one we selected. Now the picture path is slightly different. It's in H and the expense row. H and the expense row. So that's our picture path. So now we're pretty much the same. So now then of course this size is going to be too big. We can't make it that big. 200, let's just say 200. Receipt table picker, we're going to give it a name. And then I don't want it exactly, so let's increment it a little bit. Dot increment left a little bit to the right. So this would be, let's just say 5. And increment top, that's going to put it down a little bit from the top. Increment top. 5. And then what I want to do is I want to run this macro when we select, right? When we select something, I want to run the macro and display the picture here if it's available. So let's add it to our expenses here, right under the target row. Right after, I'm going to click paste that macro called display table picture. So now when we select it, we'll check our code, variable expense again, fix that spelling on that. Okay, so continue on with that. All right, no more errors. So now we have an expense row, but we have too many pictures here. Let's just delete this one. That's an old one. We don't need that. And this is an old one. Okay, so now if we have pictures, okay, and we also have to fix this table, update that to table picture. So now it should move over accordingly. Perfect. It's a little bit, we want to move it over a little bit to the right. Let's add it, it's too far. Increment left, let's make it a lot bigger there. Now we can put it in the center there. All right, that looks very nice. Now we can see a picture. Now we can save it. Let's continue going on. Let's add in more down here. Let's put one in July. So 5, 7, 10, and then the type. This is for the next receipt. amount, let's say 45, category, give it a category, save and next. And we have one more receipt to go. Let's take a look, one more. All right, let's take a look. I think our formula only made it down to, let's say, our formula made it down to 23. So let's update that. Well, our formula made it down to 23. So let's change this. Instead of 32, let's make this 23. Now it's blank. Check for receipts. And we just need to hide this button. We want to make sure when we have no receipts, we want to make sure there's no receipts. So we're going to copy this. We want to make sure that's hidden if there's no receipts. So back into the code. And when we update the macro called check and review, no receipts, want to make sure that that's hidden. Dot shapes, save and next button, dot visible equals MSO false. No more receipts, hide that button, no need to show that button. Check for receipts, no receipts to show. Perfect. Okay, great. Well, that looks really good. Now I want to add in a brand new picture from my phone. I want to take a picture from my phone and add it in so to show you that. Okay, so I've got my Dropbox and here's my phone, my live phone. I'm using a power mirror to show you this. And what I'm going to do is on my phone here, I'm going to basically take a picture using this plus in the lower right. I'm going to click that plus and then I'm going to click scan document. And I've got a receipt here that we're going to show. So it's on my desk here. So I'm going to just scan it. I'm going to look at it, just kind of point. It's really good. Going to click that picture. And once the picture is taken, it'll process it. And then what I want to do is I'm going to select, I'm going to go next. It looks right. That's about as good as it's going to get. And then I'm going to select JPEG. I want JPEG. So I'm going to select that option. Keep the name the same. Click the check in the upper right corner. Now it's creating a JPEG. And next thing I'm going to do is save it as. Okay, and save to receipts already there. Now it's uploading, and now we'll check my Dropbox folder, go into the Dropbox folder here, and here's the receipt that just came in. It's automatically here. Now all we need to do, again, click on the check for receipts. Now automatically it's here in my thing, and all I need to do is add in the date. That receipt that I just took, it's automatically in here. Very cool. I'm glad I got to show you this expense tracker. It's been a really fantastic training. Make sure you download the application if you like it, and also go ahead and check out some of the applications that we have. And also I've got 100 applications for just $37. Thanks so much for this training, and we'll see you next week.